Oh, hey Bio20s, didn't see you there. I definitely wasn't listening to Pink Pony Club, that's for sure. Welcome back for another lesson. We are going to talk about cellular respiration today. So we're going to talk about the importance of cellular respiration, and we're going to get into the very first step of cellular respiration, which is called glycolysis. Okay, so cellular respiration, often seen as the opposite of photosynthesis. In theory, yes. In equation, yes. But really, cellular respiration is a process done by all living things. So it's how we extract energy from high energy molecules like glucose. We are going to take a compound like glucose or a glucose-like molecule, and we are going to extract the energy to basically do all the different things our body needs to do, like run and walk and jump and move things around and send various signals and pump things in and out. That's all going to require energy. Now, back when we talked about photosynthesis, we said that we need to use energy, so we need to use ATP to make glucose, which is true. But to use glucose to make energy, we actually need a different process. Now, the really cool thing about plants is that a plant is essentially self-sufficient. So a plant can take solar energy, right, convert that into ATP, it can take water and it can take CO2, mix it all together to make glucose. And then when it needs to use the glucose, it can do cell respiration to make ATP to run its functions. Now, we of course, as human beings, can't do that. We need to get our glucose from plants or other food sources. So the simple equation for cell respiration is we take one molecule of glucose, we take oxygen, we get energy in the form of ATP, and then we also get some H2O and some CO2. In the process, there's also going to be some intermediate molecules. We're going to have a molecule known as NADH, not to be confused with NADPH. This is a different molecule, similar in structure, but there's NADH and FADH2. And then we have, so they're essentially electron carriers, very similar to photosynthesis. We have a molecule called NAD+, which will gain electrons and then carry those electrons to where they need to go. So when it gains the electrons and a hydrogen, it makes NADH. And then FAD+ will gain two hydrogens as well as some electrons to make FADH2. They are essentially two stable electron carrying molecules that we're going to use through this entire process. Okay, now why do we need ATP? What is the purpose of ATP? ATP is kind of like this. This is the analogy I like to use. ATP is like putting a coin into a vending machine, okay? So, yeah, and I know nowadays you can just tap or use Apple Pay or whatnot, but let's assume the vending machine only takes loonies, right? The vending machine will only accept loonies and you have a $100 bill. You can't just put the $100 bill into the vending machine, it won't accept it. It's the same idea here. You have glucose. Glucose is the $100 bill, but your body is not going to accept the glucose. In order to do things like pump, move things around, move our bodies, move our cells, we need the currency of energy, which is ATP. So what we essentially need to do is take that $100 bill, take that glucose, and then convert it into ATP, or in this, loonies, right? You can then run the vending machine. So here are all the different things that ATP can do. So motion, obviously, so moving your muscles, but also motion of just cells, cellular organisms, single cell organisms. We can also cause movement within the cell itself when the cell is dividing for cell division. Anything involving transportation, this is including the sodium-potassium pump, the hydrogen ion pump, moving things in and out of the membrane. Building molecules takes energy. So if we want to build protein, we want to build muscle, make new DNA, replicate DNA, this all takes energy. Also reactions. So enzymes that we'll talk about later when we get into the digestive system, they can be turned on or off using ATP. And this doesn't really apply to humans, but bioluminescence, it's pretty cool. When things like fireflies and glowworms can light up, that also takes energy, that takes ATP. Okay, so back to my conversion analogy. We are going to take our high energy molecule, our $100 bill, our glucose molecule, and we are going to convert that into usable energy molecules called ATP. So ATP, it's not readily available in our cells. What we need to do is take the glucose from the food we eat, break it down into ATP, and then use that ATP to run our various cellular functions. Okay, now here's the thing, and here's where we go into the actual conversion. As we know, no conversion is 100% effective, or efficient, I should say. So no conversion is 100% efficient. If it was, that'd be great. You give me a $100 bill, I give you 100 loonies, great, awesome. But you know what, I'm doing all the work. I'm the one actually getting the money, changing, counting it, so I take a little bit of that as a conversion fee. Now, if this were a cell respiration conversion fee, you would give me $100, I would give you 36 loonies. That's a horrible conversion. No one would ever make that deal, but essentially that's what your body does. You take one molecule of glucose, and at best, and I'll show you this in the next coming videos, at best, you're getting 36% ATP, so 36 molecules of ATP. And that's if you're like firing on all cylinders. In honesty, you're probably only getting like 28 or 30. So it's an even worse conversion. And the remaining energy is actually lost as heat, which explains why you get a little bit warmer when you work out. You're making more ATP, in turn making more heat, raising your body temperature. So really this conversion is not a very great conversion. Now yes, we get ATP and we need it to function, we need it to survive, but the actual process is not super efficient. Now, there are two ways we can make energy, and all it just comes down to is oxygen present or not. If oxygen is present, we will go through what's called aerobic cellular respiration. So I like to think of it like air, breathe in air, aerobic cellular respiration, oxygen is present. Now, we can still make ATP without the presence of oxygen, but it's gonna be not as efficient, and we call this anaerobic respiration. And we can do both, I'll show you both, but we're gonna focus on a process that you can do regardless of oxygen. So we're gonna focus on the first step here, which is glycolysis. And this is actually gonna be present in both processes, aerobic or anaerobic. So let's say, for example, oxygen's present. Let's say you have oxygen available. You take your one molecule of glucose, you end up producing 36 molecules of ATP. You'll get 6 molecules of CO2 and 6 molecules of water. And there's 4 steps in this process. So there's glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, the Krebs cycle, yes, there's another cycle, and the electron transport and chemiosmosis. Now, let's say oxygen is not present. If oxygen is not present, it's only a 2-step process, but notice it still has glycolysis. So whether oxygen is present or not, you always do glycolysis, but this is what we call anaerobic respiration. The byproducts will be 2 ATP, ethanol, or lactic acid, depending what type of organism you are, and the steps, glycolysis and a fermentation step. So we're going to go through the process of glycolysis here because this is present in both types of respiration. So once again, whether it's aerobic or anaerobic, you will go through glycolysis. So this is the very first beginning part. It's Greek for sugar splitting. We are going to take that molecule of glucose and we are essentially going to split it in half. That's the whole idea here. We're going to take our glucose molecule, which is a 6-carbon molecule. We really want to keep track of our carbons here. Sometimes it's helpful to maybe model this out or build a little glucose molecule. We're going to take that 6-carbon glucose, we're going to break it down into 2 pyruvate molecules. And each pyruvate contains 3 carbons. So that's the idea here. Now, there's the old analogy, right? You gotta spend money to make money. It's the same idea here. Glucose doesn't get broken down for free. You can't just break glucose down. It needs a little bit of energy to start the process. So glucose, glycolysis, actually takes 2 ATP to get started, which kind of doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, if I want to break the glucose down to make energy, why am I using energy to break the glucose down? The answer is you get out more than you put in. So in this case, we're going to take 1 molecule of glucose. We are going to put in 2 molecules of ATP to essentially start the process, and then we're going to get out more than we put in. Now, once again, regardless, you notice there's no oxygen. Oxygen isn't needed for this part. Regardless if you are doing aerobic or anaerobic, you will start with glycolysis, and it always begins in the cytoplasm of the cell. So if it's an anaerobic bacteria, cytoplasm of the cell. It's a human muscle cell, cytoplasm of the cell. You're also going to get out 2 electron carriers. We talked about these earlier, NADHs. Those are going to be your electron carriers that we're going to use for later. And you're going to get 4 molecules of ATP. So once again, this is the whole spend money to make money, right? You spent 2 ATP, you made 4 ATP for a net gain of 2 ATP. So we say that glycolysis gives us 2 ATP. So here's what it looks like all put together. Now, this process, not as simple as it looks here. It's actually a super complicated 10-step process with a bunch of different crazy names and enzymes. You don't need to know that. You just need to know the basics of what is going in and what is going out. So what's going in? Obviously our 6-carbon glucose, that's what's going in. Okay, what else is going in? Well, we're gonna have our 2 molecules of ATP. So we're gonna use 2 molecules of ATP, and then when we use the ATP, remember it turns into ADP and a phosphate. So we've used 2 ATP to start this process, to start breaking apart the bonds within the molecule. When this process goes through, we're also gonna create 2 NADHs and some hydrogen as well. We are going to save that for actually step number 4. So we're gonna just put that to the side, save it for step number 4, but keep in mind we're making 2 NADHs, which is a electron carrying molecule. So it has high energy electrons inside of it. And finally, we're also gonna make 4 ATP and 2 pyruvate molecules. So in total, if we spent 2 ATP, we got 4 ATP, we get a net of plus 2 ATP. So if you just did glycolysis, you would end with 2 ATP, which is a horrible conversion, right? It would be like a $100 bill netting you $2. Horrible. So obviously we're gonna go farther than that, but this is where we're gonna end today. Next lesson, we're gonna talk about if oxygen is present, what are we gonna do to those 2 pyruvate molecules to extract the other 34 ATP. So thanks again for watching, and we'll chat soon.